The morning of my grandmother's estate reading, I wore the blazer she bought me 3 Christmases ago. Charcoal gray, slightly too large in the shoulders, with a small moth hole near the left pocket she'd meant to fix but never did. I don't know why I wore it. Maybe I wanted her in the room with me. Maybe I needed the reminder that someone, at some point, had actually chosen me. The house was already full when I arrived. My uncle's car was in the driveway, the new one, the black Escalade he bought 6 months after Grandma's first stroke, when the doctor said she had maybe 2 years. My aunt's minivan was parked crooked on the lawn like she'd been in too much of a hurry to straighten it out. Their kids were somewhere inside. I could hear them running. I sat in my car for a minute. Just 1 minute. Then I went in. My name is Sophia. I'm 31 years old. For the last 4 years, I've been the one, not the favorite, not the golden child. Just the one who showed up. I moved back to Harrowfield, Pennsylvania when I was 27. A decision that cost me a job offer in Chicago, a relationship that was already half broken, and about 3 years of my social life. My grandmother, Evelyn, had been diagnosed with vascular dementia after her second minor stroke. She was 79. She still recognized faces. She still made her cornbread on Sundays. But she couldn't manage her medications, couldn't drive anymore, couldn't be trusted with the stove after she left a burner on for 6 hours one Tuesday in March. My mother, Evelyn's youngest daughter, had died when I was 11. A car accident on I-78 in the middle of January. So it was just me and Grandma for most of my adolescence. She is the reason I graduated high school. She is the reason I graduated college. She drove 4 hours each way to watch me walk across a stage in a gymnasium that smelled like rubber and industrial cleaner, and she cried the entire time. When the doctor started talking about care options, I drove to Pennsylvania myself. I didn't ask for a vote. My uncle, my mother's older brother, lived 40 minutes away. His wife had opinions about how Evelyn should be cared for, mostly opinions that didn't require them to actually do anything. My Aunt Evelyn's other daughter lived in Connecticut. She called every Sunday for about 6 months, then every other Sunday, then occasionally. I became the one who sorted the medications, who drove to the neurologist, who learned, from a YouTube video at 2 in the morning, how to navigate Medicare supplemental coverage because none of us had any idea what we were doing, and the social worker at the hospital handed us a pamphlet and wished us luck. Grandma knew what was happening to her. That was the hardest part. She had windows, long, clear stretches where she was entirely herself, entirely present, and in those windows she talked to me. She'd say, "You know they're going to fight over this house." I'd say, "Grandma, stop." She'd say, "Grandma, stop." She'd say, "I'm not being dramatic, Sophia. I know my children." She wasn't being dramatic. In the last year of her life, my uncle started coming around more, not to help, to visit. Which sounds the same but isn't. Visiting meant sitting in the living room while I made coffee. Visiting meant asking Grandma questions about the property, about whether she'd updated her paperwork, about what she wanted done with certain pieces of furniture. Visiting meant leaving after 2 hours without having changed a single bedsheet or refilled a single prescription. His wife came once. She walked through the house slowly, touching things. The china cabinet in the dining room. The side table by the front door. She ran her finger along the fireplace mantel like she was checking for dust, which she wasn't. I watched her do it and I didn't say anything. Evelyn passed on a Thursday in October. Hospice was involved by the end, which helped. I was there. I held her hand. She hadn't spoken clearly in about 9 days, but a few hours before she died, she looked at me very directly and squeezed my fingers. Just once. I have to believe she knew I was there. The estate attorney, a quiet man named Mr. Holt, who'd worked with Evelyn for over a decade, contacted us 3 weeks later to schedule the reading. He'd been very precise on the phone. All beneficiaries should be present. I'd also asked that you not discuss the contents of the will with one another beforehand. I remember finding that last part slightly strange. Later, I understood why he said it. The reading was held at Mr. Slickston Holt's office in town. A low brick building with dark carpet and framed photographs of covered bridges on the walls. We sat in a conference room, my uncle and his wife on one side of the table, my aunt, who'd driven down from Connecticut that morning, on the other. Her husband had stayed home. 2 cousins, my uncle's kids, both adults, sat near the window looking at their phones. I sat at the end alone. I hadn't told anyone I was coming in the blazer. Nobody asked. Mr. Holt came in, set a folder on the table, and poured himself a glass of water. He had the manner of someone who had done this many times and had long since stopped being surprised by what happened in these rooms. He read through the standard language first: the property, the accounts, some smaller bequests, a set of pearl earrings to my aunt, a pocket watch that had belonged to my grandfather to my uncle, Grandma's car to one of the cousins. Then he paused. The remainder of the estate, he said, including the family home at 42012 Birchwood Lane, the investment account held at First Heritage Bank, and all remaining personal property, is bequeathed in full to my granddaughter, Sophia. The room went quiet. My aunt was the first to speak. "I'm sorry, can you repeat that?" Mr. Holt repeated it. My uncle's wife made a sound I cannot fully describe. Not quite a word. Not quite, not a word. My uncle put his palms flat on the table. He was very still for a moment. Then he said, "That can't be right." "She told me." He stopped himself. "She told you what?" my aunt said, turning to look at him. "Nothing." He shook his head. "It doesn't matter. This doesn't make sense. Sophia she wasn't even close with Mom. We grew up in that house. That one hit. I want to be honest about that. Even knowing what I knew, even being as prepared as I thought I was, that sentence hit somewhere real. She wasn't even close with Mom. 4 years. 4 years of my life. And that was the version of events he decided to believe, or decided to say out loud, which might not be the same thing. I kept my face still. Grandma had been very specific about that. She'd told me once, in one of her clear windows, "Whatever happens in that room, I need you to stay quiet. I've already handled it. You just have to be still." I didn't know exactly what she meant at the time. I thought it was just her being dramatic in the way she sometimes was toward the end, making big pronouncements about things she couldn't control. I was wrong about that too. My aunt said, "Is there any possibility this will isn't current?" "When was it last updated?" 14 months ago, Mr. Holt said. Mrs. Evelyn was of sound mind at the time of signing, which was confirmed by 2 independent witnesses and a physician's written assessment. "A physician's assessment," my uncle repeated. He said it the way people say things when they want to imply they're skeptical without technically accusing anyone of anything. Mr. Holt looked at him. "Yes. Just that. Just yes." Then my uncle's wife leaned forward and said, and I remember this clearly because I remember being surprised by how quickly she went there. Sophia had access to all of Evelyn's accounts. She was managing everything. We don't know what conversations happened, what pressure was applied. "I would stop there," Mr. Holt said. She didn't stop. "I'm just saying, a woman with dementia, alone with one family member who controlled her finances and her medications and her—" "I would stop there," he said again. "Quiet, firm, because what you're describing is a very serious allegation, and before you finish making it, I think you should see something." He opened the folder. Inside was a document I hadn't seen before, a letter, handwritten. In Evelyn's careful cursive, the way she wrote when she was writing slowly and deliberately, not the looser version that came out when she was just jotting things down. Below the letter was a photograph, and below the photograph was what appeared to be a printed log of some kind. Pages of it. Mrs. Evelyn, Mr. Holt said, anticipated that questions might be raised about the circumstances surrounding her estate planning. Beginning approximately 2 years ago, with the assistance of this office, she established several forms of documentation to address those questions. He slid the letter to the center of the table so everyone could see. It was dated 14 months ago, the same date as the will. It was 3 pages long. She'd written it herself, in that careful hand, and it described in specific detail what my 4 years had looked like. The medications by name. The appointments she'd attended and who'd driven her. The calls she'd made to my uncle and aunt that went unreturned. The twice she'd fallen and who had come. She wrote about the night I slept on her couch for 2 weeks after her second hospitalization because I was afraid to leave her alone. She wrote about the Sunday mornings, the cornbread, the way I read to her from her mystery novels when her eyes got too tired. She wrote in the third paragraph, "I want it known that no pressure of any kind was placed upon me." Sophia never asked for anything. She never suggested she expected anything. She simply stayed. That is the rarest thing I know. Nobody in the room said anything. Then Mr. Holt slid forward the printed log. "This," he said, "is a record maintained over 2 years by a home monitoring system installed in the residence with Mrs. Evelyn's full knowledge and consent. It logs entry and exit timestamps for all individuals and documents, activity patterns within the home." My uncle looked up. "What kind of monitoring system?" "A standard home security setup. Cameras at entry points. Motion sensors in key rooms." Mrs. Fanson's. Evelyn was involved in selecting the system. She had access to the footage at all times. I didn't know all of this. I knew she'd mentioned getting a security system. I'd assumed it was because she was nervous about being alone. I hadn't known the full scope of what she'd set up or why. The log showed 2 years of timestamps. Every time I arrived, every time I left, every time anyone else had come. It showed in plain columns how many times my uncle had visited in the past 2 years. 11 times. How many times my aunt had come? 4. It showed the weeks I'd been there every single day. It showed the overnight stays. It showed a 6-week stretch in the spring where I was the only person who came at all. It also showed something else. 3 entries, flagged in a different color. Items removed from the residence. Mr. Repel. Holt said, "The system also records significant motion events in certain rooms. 3 of those events correspond to the removal of items from Mrs. Evelyn's bedroom and the study. The items removed include a piece of jewelry valued at approximately $4,000, a collection of silver that had been specifically designated in an earlier version of the will, and a sum of cash Mrs. Evelyn kept in a lockbox in her closet." The room was very quiet. "The footage from those events has been reviewed," Mr. Holt said, "and copies have been retained by this office and by local law enforcement, who were notified last week per Mrs. Evelyn's prior written instructions." My uncle's wife had gone completely still. My uncle said, "That's not... We were just taking things for safekeeping." "She said we could..." "She did not say that," Mr. Holt said. "That is documented as well." I looked at my hands on the table. I'd been very careful not to look at anyone directly, which Grandma had also told me to do. "Don't look at them," she'd said. "It'll be hard. Do it anyway." She'd known exactly how it was going to go, and she built something that could hold it without me having to hold it myself. That is the kind of person she was. My aunt, to her credit, didn't say anything else after the letter was read. She sat very still. She left before anyone else did, before the meeting was even formally concluded. She didn't look at me on her way out. I don't know what she was thinking. I hope she was thinking about the Sunday calls she stopped making. My uncle tried for another 20 minutes to contest the will on the grounds that Evelyn had not been competent. Mr. 20 Money. Holt explained patiently that he had a physician's assessment on file, 2 independent witnesses, a handwritten letter, 2 years of video documentation, and Evelyn's prior written instruction that any contest to the will be treated as grounds to initiate legal proceedings regarding the removed property. He said the phrase, "the alternative is a subpoena," in the same quiet voice he'd used for everything else. My uncle left. His wife did not make eye contact with me, not once, the entire morning. I sat in the parking lot afterward for a long time. I didn't cry. I'd done most of that already. In the months before she died and the weeks after. What I felt was something harder to name, like the ground had finally stopped moving. Like something that had been held at an angle for a very long time had finally been set down flat. She'd given me the house. She'd given me the account. Not enormous, but real, enough to cover the mortgage she'd left on the property and have something left over. She'd given me the documentation to protect it. And she'd done it all without telling me because she knew, I think, that if she'd told me I would have said, "Grandma, stop, I'm not doing this for the house." Which was true. I wasn't. I did it because she was mine and I was hers, and because someone had to, and because the night she squeezed my hand in the hospital hallway when they were transferring her between floors, and she said very quietly, "I don't know what I'd do without you, baby," that was enough. That was already everything. I moved into 42012 Birchwood Lane 3 weeks after the estate closed. It took me a while to stop feeling like a guest. I still sleep in my old room, the one I had in high school, because walking into her bedroom in the morning felt too large too soon. I'll get there. The kitchen still smells like her cornbread somehow. I don't know how, I haven't made it myself yet. I'm not sure I'm ready to find out if mine tastes the same. The blazer is hanging in the front closet. I still haven't fixed the moth hole. I don't think I'm going to. There's a photograph on the mantle now. Just one. It's her my college graduation. She's wearing her good dress, the navy one, and she's looking at me like I've done something extraordinary, which I hadn't. I'd just walked across a stage. But that was always Grandma. She looked at ordinary things like they were extraordinary, and somehow they became that. My uncle called once about 3 weeks after the reading. He said he hoped we could find a way to move forward. I told him I'd think about it. I haven't yet. My aunt sent a card, a real one, handwritten, not a text. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't realized, and then she crossed that out and wrote, "That's not an excuse, I should have been there. I'm sorry, Sophia." I put the card in the kitchen drawer, the one by the stove where Grandma used to keep things she didn't know what to do with. I don't know what I'll do with it either. Maybe that's okay. Maybe some things just need a drawer for a while. I think about her all the time. I think about the way she laughed at her own jokes before she got to the punchline. I think about how she took her coffee. 1 sugar, splash of cream, always stirred counterclockwise, which she claimed made a difference and could never prove. I think about the last clear conversation we had, 6 weeks before she died, when she looked at me across the kitchen table and said, "I want you to know that I see you. I see everything you've done, and I'm not going to let them take it from you." I didn't understand exactly what she meant. I do now. She'd spent 2 years building something. Not just a will, not just a legal document, a record, an argument, a case she made, carefully and quietly, for the person she believed I was. She did it in secret because she knew it had to be unimpeachable. She did it because she knew her own family, and she loved them enough to know they would try. And she did it because she wanted me to walk out of that room without having had to fight for myself. Because she knew that fighting, even winning, leaves marks. She wanted to be the one who took the hit. I still think about that. The generosity of it, the planning it took, the clarity she had in those last windows when everything else was going. She knew. She always knew. I am living in her house. I am making her coffee, 1 sugar, splash of cream. And I haven't figured out the counterclockwise thing yet, but I'm working on it. I am learning the way the furnace sounds when it kicks on at night, and the way the 3rd porch step creaks, and where the circuit breaker is, and all the other small things that make a house real. I'm the one who tends this place now, the same way she once tended me. I think she'd be okay with that. I've had a lot of time to sit with what happened in that conference room, the covered bridge photographs on the walls, the way nobody looked at each other when Mr. Holt finished reading, the sound my uncle's chair made when he pushed back from the table. What I keep coming back to isn't the house or the account or even winning, if that's what you call it. What I keep coming back to is the fact that Evelyn did all of it without telling me. 2 years of documentation, a physician's assessment, a written letter in her careful cursive, a security system she chose herself and understood completely. She built an entire case while I was just trying to make sure she had her medication before bed. She didn't tell me because she knew I'd say it was unnecessary. And it would have been unnecessary to me, but she knew people I didn't know yet, even though they were my own family. She'd watched them her whole life. She knew what money does to people who've decided they deserve it. And she moved quietly, and she moved first. That's the thing about integrity that nobody tells you when you're young. It isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up on a Tuesday when it's inconvenient, on a weekend when you'd rather be somewhere else, in a hospital room at 2 in the morning when nobody is watching and nobody is keeping score. You do it anyway, not because you expect a return, but because it's the only way you know how to be. And over time, that consistency becomes something that can't be argued with. It becomes a record. It becomes proof. My uncle tried to rewrite the story in that room. He said I hadn't been close with Grandma. He said it with confidence, the way people say things they've rehearsed. and I understood in that moment what Evelyn had understood long before me. That the people who do the least talking often do the most watching. She'd seen him. She'd seen his wife touching things that weren't theirs yet. She'd counted the visits. She'd felt the absences. And she'd written it all down. There's a version of this story where I fight back in that room, where I defend myself, list everything I gave up, raise my voice. I used to think that version would feel better. It wouldn't. Because the moment you start arguing your own worth to someone who's already decided it, you've already lost something. Evelyn understood that too. She didn't want me to have to argue. She wanted the documents to do it. She wanted me to be able to sit there quietly and let the truth hold itself up. Resilience isn't always about pushing through something hard in the moment. Sometimes it's about having lived with enough integrity in the years before that. When the hard moment comes, you don't have to say anything at all. I think about the people who make choices the way my uncle did. Not dramatically, not with obvious malice, just with a slow accumulation of small decisions to not show up, to not carry anything heavy, to arrive only when there might be something to gain. Those choices compound too, just in the other direction. Evelyn left me a house, but the more lasting thing she left me was the example of someone who saw clearly, planned carefully, loved quietly, and trusted that doing the right thing, done consistently and without fanfare, would eventually speak for itself. It did. I'm still learning how to let that be enough.